Do you want to stay more focused on the right goals in your life, or even just figure out what the right goals are for you? Do you want clarity? Do you want better work-life balance? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to Success Through Failure.
Welcome to the Success Through Failure podcast, the show that reveals failure as your path to success. You'll listen to intriguing interviews with some of the most successful people on the planet and learn how their failures became a launchpad for success and how yours can too. Here's your host, former Division I All-American wrestler, former Division I head coach, speaker, and personal coach, Jim Harshaw.
Welcome to another episode of Success Through Failure. Today, I bring you Michael Chandler. Originally from St. Louis, Michael grew up in a typical blue-collar, hard-working household with a union carpenter and a secretary for parents. The value of hard work was instilled early on, as well as the desire to do what he could for those around him. In 2004, Mike enrolled at the University of Missouri, walking onto the school's wrestling squad, and while at Missouri, Chandler was a four-time NCAA qualifier. He collected 100 career wins, as well as earning fifth place at the NCAA championships, earning him Division I NCAA Division I All-American honors. Following his collegiate wrestling career, Mike began training mixed martial arts with Xtreme Couture, and he fought his way to the top and is the current Bellator Lightweight Champion, ranked as the number 7 lightweight in the world, according to FightMatrix.com, and is regarded as one of the top 20 greatest lightweight fighters of all time. Right here on the show. And hold on, I got an alarm going off in the background. Told Mike that we were going to keep this as authentic, as real as possible, and I didn't. I'm the guy who's supposed to have my phone turned off during the podcast, and I didn't even do that. So if you don't have time, as usual, if you don't have time to listen to the entire episode, or if you hear something you like but you don't have time to write it down, make sure you grab your free copy of the action plan. Just go to jimharshawjr.com/action. That's jimharshawjr.com/action. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jim. Man, I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm glad that Todd Durkin connected us. What an interesting, amazing individual. And for those listeners who have not listened to my interview with Todd Durkin, you can get that over at episode 95. So jimharshawjr.com/95. Todd Durkin is just an amazing dude. Connected me with Mike. So Mike, tell us a little bit more about your background. So we got a little bit there in the bio, but give us a little bit more about how you got from where you started to where you're at now.
Yeah, I think I was, a typical Midwest family, typical Midwest kid in a family. I had two younger brothers, mom and dad. As you alluded to, were both just hardworking people. They did everything they possibly could for us children. My family had a scrap metal business, or my mom's side of the family had a scrap metal business as well as a restaurant. So my mom was working at both of those places. She was basically working two jobs. She would work scrap metal during the day as the secretary, basically running all the operations. And then in the evening, she would go and, waitress at the restaurant. And that was just normal, and then my dad was a union carpenter and was up at 5 every single morning, still to this day. And I think you could probably attest to this too, is you've never woken up earlier than your dad.
Yeah,
your dad,
that's right.
Your dad's up and you already feel like he's gotten, all the world's problems figured out by the time you get the stitches out of your eyes. And I think that's part of what has driven me to just hard work and just knowing what hard work is, and my dad worked extra jobs and side jobs and both my parents worked two jobs just to make sure that if I wanted to go to a wrestling camp in the summertime, or I wanted to join a wrestling club outside of wrestling season, or I wanted to do this or do that, or my brothers wanted to get into something, we didn't have a lot of finances, but we had enough to be able to, for my parents to provide a leg up for us to be able to pursue dreams. And, I worked really hard in school. I was always one of those kids who was driven by the fear of getting in trouble, so I wouldn't say I was a rambunctious kid. I was kind of a crazy kid. Had a ton of energy, but I never wanted to get in trouble, never wanted to get bad grades, never wanted to, get a pink slip or written up or whatever you call it. And I think still to this day, I still carry a little bit of those traits. I'm a little bit more carefree, but I try to do right. And I try to always think about my image and the way that people will see how I act, and how I carry myself and how I conduct myself. And, now got done with high school wrestling, walked on to Mizzou. It was a leap of faith. I had, some offers to some smaller schools, Division II, Division III, NAIA schools, but something was just pulling me in the direction of going Division I. I think the biggest fear that I had was, what if I go to NAIA and I win a national title in my junior year? Would it have been enough? Would I have wished that I had gone Division I? What if? So walked on to Mizzou. Never knew if I would start. Never thought I would start, honestly, most days, and ended up starting and becoming an All-American. And through many years of falling short or self-sabotage or that kind of stuff, I finally did make it on the podium and propelled that into an MMA career, and had some ups and downs in that so far, but it's given me an amazing platform to be able to, do awesome stuff like this with people like yourself, and get my voice out there and get my, build my platform and get my message out there. So it's been a very wonderful ride of ups and downs, and I'm excited to get into it all with you.
Yeah, and you and I have a very similar message, and I'm really excited to dive into that. I want to touch on a couple things you said there already. Is, we talked a little bit before the show, and just for the listener, Mike and I were talking a little bit before the show, and when I was doing some research for this interview, we have a very similar background. My dad was a union sheet metal worker. My mom was a secretary. Just the hardest working people I know. My dad would come home from work exhausted. He would, he'd always be the first one up. Every time I'd be rolling out of bed, getting ready for school, sometimes I would catch him, packing his, grabbing his food and putting it in his lunchbox and headed out the door in his work boots and jeans and dirty shirt and jacket and stuff, heading out and doing the grind of construction work for 40 years and breathing. He used to breathe asbestos in. Like, people get worried about asbestos these days, like little, there's asbestos in some room that's like locked up down the hall, and it's like, my dad used to breathe that stuff in, literally like spit it out of his mouth, and it'd be in his nose, and he'd have to pull it out of his eyes and stuff like that, blowing through the construction site. I mean, just a tough dude, hardworking dude, and never complained, man. Never complained a day in his life. And yeah, that kind of work ethic that you learn from people like that you learned and that I learned, is just incredible. Incredible. Mentors to have and role models to have in your life. And then I was a 4-time national qualifier. I was a non-scholarship athlete at Virginia, 4-time national qualifier. Finally made All-American my senior year. So we have a very, very parallel career track. So much I want to get into it. So let's just go. Let me just ask you this real quick. Why did you choose MMA? Why MMA after you were done wrestling?
I think it was just, I don't know. I think when you get done wrestling, and I'd be interested to hear where your mindset was when you got done wrestling. I think it's that transition period where, okay, I got my degree, but what can I do with my degree? What do I really want to do with my life? What are my goals? What are my aspirations? And I think, like a lot of people, I couldn't see myself I got my degree in personal finance and real estate. So I could have right away gotten a job at a financial firm and started selling and trading stocks and bonds and some real estate stuff and kind of get into that financial industry. And truth be told, one guy that I wrestled with, who was a year ahead of me, we basically graduated together through the same exact program. And he actually works for a financial firm, and he handles my finances, and we still work together on a daily basis. I didn't want that right away. I didn't want to go, into the workforce right away. And I had Ben Askren, who was the ONE FC champion right now, welterweight champion, ranked, top 15, top 10 in the world. Got Tyron Woodley, who's the number 1 welterweight in the world, who's the champion of the UFC. They both wrestled at the University of Missouri, 3 and 2 years ahead of me. As soon as Tyron graduated, he started kind of fighting and taking a bunch of amateur fights and making his way into the industry and finding that path, if you will. And then Ben came out and started doing it. And then, so those two guys were very close to my heart in college. They helped me a ton. They were like older brothers that I never had. I wanted to be, I wanted to do what they did. I wanted to work as hard as they did. I wanted to do the things that they did and live my life like they did and become a champion, and both of those guys were multiple time All-Americans and national champions. So, I just kind of followed in their footsteps. They said, hey, I think you'd be good at this whole fighting thing. Why don't you give it a try? And, graduated in May of 2009 and fought my first fight in August of 2009 with virtually, very, very little training. I wasn't a guy who was, one of those guys who ever got in fights or any of that kind of stuff. So I didn't really have any experience. I didn't know, but I didn't know that I was going to be great at the sport, but I knew I was going to at least be pretty darn good. I think being a Division I wrestling All-American or a Division I wrestler in general, going through that 5 years of that grind, going through the ups and the downs, going through the mental training, the physical training, getting beat down and then dragging your way back up, and then just having that grit and that stick-to-itiveness that we gained over those 5 years in a Division I college wrestling room. That you're going to be better at a lot of things than a lot of people. And I know you and I can both kind of agree. We don't say that to sound like we're better than people. We don't say that to, have that cocky arrogance about us. We just know that we put in the time, we put in the work, we grinded our teeth for 5 years in one of the most roller coaster ride experiences that anyone will ever experience. And for the listeners who haven't gone through that Division I wrestling experience or that college wrestling experience, it's just hard to understand. And it's one of those things where I knew I was going to be successful at whatever I did. And fighting just seemed like the logical next step, because it was hand-to-hand combat with another man locked into a cage, very similar to wrestling. Obviously, it's a battle of wills and it's mano a mano, and, there's more weapons, if you will. There's punches and kicks and knees and elbows and submissions and that kind of stuff. So it's different in wrestling in that regard, but it's very much the same. It's me versus you. And it's my will versus your will. And it's who's going to break first and who's going to impose their will on the other person. So I just kind of liked it. And I didn't get into the sport to think, didn't necessarily know where I was going to end up. And now here I am, almost a decade into it, and had a ton of success and a couple failures, and made a good life for myself and my wife and our future kids, and still very much in the thick of it, and in my prime now. So I'm excited to continue with this prime and continue to see where I can take this thing.
It's interesting. You talk about that experience as a Division I wrestler, the 5 years, 4 years in a redshirt year that we've gone through. We have that shared experience. And, it's interesting talking to Mark Devine. Mark Devine is a Navy SEAL, author of several books, and just an incredible individual. I interviewed Mark in episode 45 for anybody who wants to listen to that. But actually, whenever I heard Mark on another podcast first, he talked about this SEAL Fit training program that he has, and he talked about this being a crucible experience in someone's life, this sort of time where you have to go through incredible pain and suffering, self-imposed and voluntary, and you can quit whenever you want, but having to go through this crucible experience and how that changes you and how that gives you a different level of self-belief that you don't, like you said, you don't necessarily share with other people. It's just kind of deep down within you. And that's what he provides for the people who sign up for his program. And one thing that he did interestingly say was, most people don't have that unless you were like a college wrestler. And so it is this unique experience that I think we have. And I think for those of you who are listening who have not had that, you have to build these challenges into your life, and this the pain and suffering, the value that brings, and the toughness that it brings, and the mental toughness more than anything is so important. And you hear MMA fighters and wrestlers, and most of them are not these sort of meathead tough guys that some people have a vision of. They're guys like Mike, who said he's not a fighter. Charlie Brennan, I interviewed Charlie in one of my first episodes ever. He said he had never gotten in a fight in his life, and he became one of the best UFC and MMA fighters in the world. But Mike, you mentioned, sort of being interested in my view, and sort of after I was done wrestling, I'll just touch briefly on this. I was similar in that I I definitely didn't want to go into just getting a job. I felt there was more in me, and I had an opportunity to go train at the Olympic Training Center. Turned that down. I had two actually assistant coaching jobs offered to me. Turned both of those down, and I actually went traveling for a year. I went on a grand adventure for a year. I'd been wrestling for so long year round that I just I wanted to step back and gain some perspective. So I went to Central America. I went to backpack through Central America, just amazing adventures, and then through Europe, and then I got a job leading adventure camping tours in the States where I met my wife, and so you and I have had sort of a similar mindset coming out of college in that we wanted something different, and something else that you had said that I think is going to be really important for the listener to hear and to hear your side of this, because I can definitely relate to this. You talked about self-sabotage. You talked about, before we got on, you actually mentioned, if people asked you if you believe, you were going to be a national champion, you would say yes, but dive into a little bit about that mindset and what you told me before the show, if you could.
Yeah, I think, in as a 31-year-old, a little bit more mature, having gone through all these experiences, thinking back on my life and where it all not went wrong, or just trying to think where it could have came together, because it's almost a little bit, I'm almost a little bit ashamed to say, it's hard to say I was the hardest worker in the room. I was the guy who got good grades, and I didn't party, and I didn't make the decisions that a lot of the guys were doing. I was living the cleanest life and the most dedicated life and the hardest working life in that college wrestling room. So why shouldn't I have been the most successful guy in that wrestling room?
And by the way, for the listener who's not into wrestling, I mean, that was an amazing wrestling room. There's a lot of incredible wrestlers in that room.
Yeah. And so if you look at it and you say, man, this guy works so hard. He's a coach's dream. If coach tells him to jump, he does not ask or look at you sideways. He goes and he jumps headfirst into whatever you want him to. And he will go out there and he will fight harder than anybody else will and train harder than anybody else will. But for some reason, the mental side of things didn't add up to the physical side of things, and I don't know where it came from, whether it was childhood or whether it was failures in childhood, or whether it was the fear of failure. I don't think it was the fear of failure as much as it just wasn't believing that I deserved to be the best and believing that I deserved to be on top of that podium, and not just lip service, not just telling a reporter or telling the coach that, yeah, I'm going to be a national champion. Yeah, I'm going to beat Jordan Burroughs. Yeah, I'm going to beat Mike Poeta and Jordan Lean and these guys, and going out there and competing and getting ever so close, but always somehow making sure I didn't win, and I think I've done some research and some reading into sports psychology, and I can't quote the books or quote the authors, but a lot of the stuff that I've kind of come up with is they talk about how a lot of people are unfamiliar with excellent levels of success, and it's almost a scary thing because it becomes a newfound responsibility, if you will. It's easy to be average. It's so easy to be average, and average to be mediocre. I posted something on Instagram the other day, and it was just a cool quote, and it said, only the mediocre can be expected to be always at their best, because you can always be at your best when you're mediocre, when you're never striving for something great, whenever you're not outside of your comfort zone, whenever you're just living a life that has no goals, that has no drive, that has no big aspirations, no big, hairy, audacious goals, these goals that make people feel uncomfortable, these goals that make people doubt you. Whenever you don't have those, you don't have that exponential fear of being laughed at or failure or literally everything coming crashing down, and I think large amounts of success, the success that Ben Askren was having, I was literally witnessing one of the greatest wrestlers of all time in my wrestling room as one of my friends, as one of my mentors. And I was seeing the exponential levels at which he was, of the success that he was having and pinning people and breaking people and just crushing people. And for some reason, something inside of me that I think, if I'm completely honest, that scared me a little bit, and I don't know if it was, like we talked about, something in my childhood where I didn't get enough, believe in yourself type of stuff, or I didn't get enough, hey man, you can be a great one, you could be the best in the world. Whether it was me just, I guess, just not wanting to break into that realm of greatness, So I think I'll never forget. I think the biggest self-sabotage I ever had was at what's the big tournament in Iowa, the national duels, and it was we were ranked top 3 in the country at the time. Mizzou was, and Minnesota was ranked top 3, maybe number 1 at the time. And I'm the 157 pounder. We started at 125, and Mizzou was doing well. We won at 125, or won at 133, 41, 49. And all of a sudden my match comes up, and I have to wrestle CP Schlater, who's top 5 in the country at this time. And I think I'm a sophomore, and I go out there and I take him down, ride him out, take him down, ride him. And I'm up by like 5 points going into the third period. Very similar to another story that you talked about in one of your other podcasts or in one of your interviews, because it sounded very similar to me. Going into the third period up by 5 points or something, and I somehow end up losing. And you just get done. You get done with the match, and you think, what the heck just happened? How did that happen? It's almost like it's an out-of-body experience, and you weren't in control. Your subconscious took over, and that cognitive dissonance of what you're trying to accomplish not lining up with what you truly believe. Yeah. And I think my whole college wrestling career can be defined by self-sabotage, cognitive dissonance of getting ever so close, but not truly. Man, I wanted it. I don't want to say I didn't want it, but not truly being okay with that responsibility of being the best in the country and beating Jordan Burroughs or beating these tough guys, So, sorry, that was a long-winded explanation, but I think it all boils down to that cognitive dissonance. What you have to bring your level of belief up so high that what you're trying to accomplish is in line with it. Because if what you're trying to accomplish is above and higher than where your expectations or where your belief in yourself is, you're always going to find a way to compete or sabotage yourself downward toward what you're trying, downward below what you're trying to accomplish, if that makes sense.
Man, I don't know if it makes sense to the listener, but I've had chills for the last several minutes listening to you, because I feel like you're inside my head. I was voted the 3-time hardest worker on the team at UVA, my sophomore, junior, and senior year. Hardest worker on the team, voted by my teammates and coaches. But my level of success didn't match my work ethic. I could go toe to toe with some of the best guys in the country, but I could lose to guys I shouldn't. And I was kind of on the brink for a lot of years and of being an All-American, and I just never crossed that threshold until I finally let go of the outcome and focus solely on the process and just mastering my craft and being the best that I could possibly be. And whatever the place or the number or the title next to my name, I had to finally let go of that my senior year. And once I finally did, I was able to finally, wrestle as close to my potential as I ever had. And I don't know about you, Mike, but I want to talk about this a little bit. Once I finally became an All-American, I was done. It was the end of my career. It was over. And I'm 41 years old now. And in this sort of recurring dream that I've had for the last, 18, 20 years almost is sort of slowly fading. But I've had this recurring dream that I've got one more year of eligibility. And because I as soon as I became an All-American, I'm like, okay, now I figured it out. Like, I finally figured it out. It's not about lip service self-belief. It was about a true, deep belief that I can compete at the highest level. And that was the only thing I cared about is competing at the highest level I possibly could. And once I cared only about that and not about actually winning the match, I was actually able to win more matches. So, did your self-belief change when you broke through, became an All-American? I mean, what changed that self-belief? Because I tell you, I was talking to a guy, and I'm going to forward this episode to him once this gets published, not long ago, who he works so hard, but he hasn't gotten to the next level, and he's in a different profession. He's a working, he's in his 30s working now, but he works so hard at what he does, but he's not seeing the results. For you, whenever you became an All-American, did that change your belief in yourself?
Yeah, it was pretty much the worst thing in the world because, I mean, luckily for me, I had more competition in fighting. You know, the next profession of me was very similar to the wrestling.
Right.
But it's literally, you know, I don't mean to bring up, you know, bad feelings because you probably have them where, okay, I'm All-American, and now, like you said, I have so much more to give. Give me a mulligan. Give me these last years.
Right.
Give me all this time that I wasted. Let me get rid of that Michael Chandler, or that Jim Harshaw, who was so afraid to be the best, who worked so hard, but when it came time to be the best, when it came time to get your hand raised and beat some of those top guys and become the guy that everybody looks at, become the guy that wrestles on that stage, become the guy that, you know, that everybody looks to and says, man, I wish I could compete like Jim Harshaw. You know, when it came time for that to happen, you self-sabotage yourself. So it's literally might have been, luckily for me, I knew I was going into MMA, but it could be one of the worst kind of experiences of your life, realizing that you've finally turned the corner, but you wasted all that time. But really your story and your platform and these seasons of your life just continue to evolve, and they continue to propel you into the next thing. And whatever you got into next, you know, the mental state that you were in, how you thought about life, how you looked at things, probably impacted so many people around you. And now with your podcast, the platform that you have to be able to share these experiences and literally laugh. I laugh at that Michael Chandler, who was 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, just working like a hamster on a hamster wheel, just running faster than anybody else. But then, you know, falls off at the last second when it was time to win the race. You know, I just think, what in the heck was he thinking? And I just thank God that I have this freedom, that the chains have been lifted, that this weight was lifted off of my shoulders, because it really was just the fear. It was a little bit of fear of failure, because you did work so hard and you did have so many people that believed in you. And I think it was the trying to be perfect. You know, I think in my MMA career where I fell short was, you know, you get into this sport and there's a lot of eyeballs on you, and you're on TV and you're under the lights, and you hear about George St. Pierre and Anderson Silva and all these big names and these guys that with these iconic status in the sport. And you're like, man, I could be that. I want to be that. I want to be perfect. I want to be perfect like them. And, you know, I went 12-0, my first 12 fights. Within 8 fights of my career, I was ranked top 5 in the world and beat Eddie Alvarez. Wow. And became the Bellator Lightweight Champion. So I had a ton of success right away, which was a testament to me finally believing in myself and finally that cognitive dissonance kind of balancing itself out, and finally truly believing and looking at the top, that number one spot in the world, and truly believing that I deserve to be there, and truly believing that I deserve to step into that cage and beat anybody in the entire world. You know, I finally believed that. And then, you know, my 13th fight came along, and I lost to Eddie Alvarez, a close kind of split decision. And, you know, that it immediately shouldn't have, but it immediately put doubt into my mind. You know, when you have so much success for such a long time and you're not used to losing, then all of a sudden you lose. And then it almost became, you know, all I could think about was loss. All I could think about was, man, maybe you're not as good as you thought you were. Man, they dropped you out of the rankings, so you're not as good as they thought you were. People are talking bad about you on Twitter. People are talking bad about you on Instagram and Facebook. You know, man, you must really stink. You know, and then that propelled me into, unfortunately, 2 more losses, and it was just, you know, it's just crazy the seasons of life that you go through and how you can, you know, we talked about the self-sabotage of college, and then the crazy exponential amounts of success I had in the very beginning of my career, and then a loss streak, and then now back to winning again. And to be honest, I forgot what your question was, so I'm trying to figure out how to tie.
Yeah, I asked, did that change your self-belief when you became an All-American? Did that, like it did for me, it changed my belief that, okay, I can be great at this, but I was out of time, and it sounds like it did the same for you, only you had more time. You had the next stage of your career, which is fighting.
Yes. And thank God I did. Yeah. Because it would have been, detrimental for me to just, like I said, go into the financial field and always just think about those 4 years that I wasted not truly believing in myself. And then, but like I said, these seasons of life and these, the ups and downs of life make you who you are. And you never know, you never know what the 20-year-old Michael and the 20-year-old setbacks when I was 20 years old, how that has molded me into the 30-year-old Michael, and how my setbacks and my successes and my failures now are going to help propel the 40-year-old Michael and the 50-year-old Michael when I start thinking about the next stages of my life and all that kind of stuff, and don't want to get ahead of myself, but because I want to live in the present. But I just know this crazy life of ups and downs is never ever guaranteed, and it's a beautiful ride if you really just, like you've said, focus on the process and not the outcomes. And man, by God, just try not to be perfect, because you're never going to be perfect. And the more pressure you put on yourself to be perfect, the harder it's going to be.
And you talk about that public failure, right? And so I want the listener to take everything that Michael's saying and relate this to your life, because you have some kind of self-doubt in you that's holding you back right now. We all do. There's a level of self-doubt that is holding us back from achieving our fullest potential. And we've got to attack it, and we've got to face it, and we've got to deal with it in order to become the person that we want to become in our relationships, in our health, in our professional, in our career, in our wealth, whatever the case might be. You have to deal with those. And most of us are not in a public forum where we're actually getting, when we fail, it's so public that people are hitting us with messages on Twitter and social media and every direction about how we suck, and how we're terrible, and people are, just throwing jabs at us right and left. We don't have to deal with that, but Michael has. So, Michael, how do you go from doubt to self-belief? How do you go from, I always ask someone to share a story of failure and how they've dealt with that. How did you deal with, you had tremendous success, and then boom, you lose one fight, and the seed of self-doubt gets planted. And then you lose two more. How do you go through that to get back on top? How do you manifest a self-belief that is not just BS lip service? How do you recreate that that true self-belief, so you can get back on top?
Yeah. I think different. Well, let me give you an example. So Ben Askren was a guy that I wrestled with. And for those of you that don't know, he was a 2-time Hodge winner, 4-time finalist, I believe.
Hodge is like the Heisman Trophy for wrestling.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just phenomenal. And the guy had no reason to believe in himself. If you looked at his body, he didn't look like, one of us tough, ripped, muscles popping out of everywhere, veins popping out of everywhere type of wrestler. He had this kind of skinny fat looking long body, and wasn't fast. I mean, I would tell you, we have this conversation all the time.
It's true. Absolutely.
Didn't look like an athlete. He lost all the runs. I would bench press more than him, squat more than him. Every single thing. I was better. I was a better athlete. I mean, I was 10 times the athlete that Ben Askren was, but he truly, truly believed in himself. By the time he got there, his freshman year of college, he believed he was going to come in and beat everybody. And for some reason I didn't. And I think, to go back to your question of how do you go from that self-doubt to that self-belief, I really do think, unfortunately, just like everything in life, it takes time under tension, and through my failures in high school, I was never a state champion. That was the goal. I failed into college, and I failed and failed and failed. And I had some success, but I failed and failed and failed until finally you get to a point where you've gone through so many ups and downs, and you've been thrown and pushed into the fire so many times that you finally just say, and this is how it was for me. You finally just say, forget this. Why in the world do I care so much? And I know it sounds counterintuitive because you have to care. You have to, I mean, for me to say right now, if you ask me, hey, Michael, why are you so successful fighting? To say, I don't care if I win or lose. I don't care about anything besides trying to live my life right, to be put on a platform so that people can be motivated and inspired by me. I want to be the best husband I can to my wife and love her and serve her. And I want to be able to provide for my future children. Other than that, I got nothing else that I really truly have to live for. This fight game does not define me. My wins and losses do not define me. My shortcomings did not define me. My wins don't define me. The amount of money and the amount of lights that I've been under in this fight game does not define me. What defines me is truly trying to become my best self. And every single time I strap on these gloves, every single time I bite down on that mouthpiece, I'm trying to outperform my previous self. And I'm not trying to be perfect, and I'm not trying to be the best in the world. Becoming the best in the world is going to come with the process of becoming the best version of yourself. You know, I can only get to so high. You know, God only has this level at which I'm going to compete at some point in my life, at the peak, the pinnacle of my career. So just work hard and believe that you're going to get there, and don't put all this pressure on yourself. And I think that's really when I started turning the corner, like you talked about in one of your podcasts about Cale Sanderson. Why is the Penn State wrestling team, excuse me, why is the Penn State wrestling team so successful? Because they don't care about winning national titles. They don't care about winning matches. They care about going out there and just having fun. I've never heard people talk about fun so much in my life than these last couple of years when I watched the NCAA championships, and they're interviewing these guys before and after and during competitions. They just get done coming off the mat, and this kid just won a national title. What was the key to your success? Well, I just wanted to go out there and have fun. What? You wanted to have fun?
Wrestling's not a fun sport. You're not supposed to have fun in wrestling, right? That's what we learned growing up.
Yeah, wrestling is a horrible sport. Wrestling is painful. Wrestling teaches you so many horrible lessons in life, and it's so painful, and you're spitting blood and bleeding tears, and it's just, but whenever you turn that corner and get a different perspective on things, and you just start believing in the process and just trying to have fun with it and not put so much pressure on the wins and the losses, there's so much freedom in that. And I think that's what happened in my senior year of college. I keep wanting to say I stopped caring so much, but I did care. I still lived my life. Right?
That's exactly what my mindset was my senior year. Yeah.
But I just didn't care as much. I wasn't defined by this big black glooming cloud of, oh my gosh, you have to live up to becoming an All-American or you're a loser. You know, and then that happened in my fighting career as well. I came out and I started doing well. So then the pressure built, and I started trying to be perfect, and I had to be perfect, and I couldn't lose a sparring round. I couldn't get punched anymore. Or I would get mad. I couldn't get submitted anymore. I couldn't fail anymore in practice, or it would mess with me mentally. And then all of a sudden, after 3 losses, 688 days without a win, after 3 times of public humiliation with my face mutilated and getting TKO'd on national television in front of 2 million people, finally, you know, after tons of reading books and self-education and listening to podcasts like yourself or other motivational people that are just edifying, and they speak into your life and they break those chains. Finally, I just said, forget this crap. Why am I doing this to myself? I don't deserve to live under this kind of pressure. I'm doing this to myself again, putting all this pressure on these wins and these losses. Just go out there and have fun. And since then, I've literally been having fun ever since that last day that I lost, after about a week or two of feeling sorry for myself and coming home to San Diego and crying with my wife on the couch and just, where the heck do we go from here? You know, all of that worry and all of that strife, I finally just gave it up and just laid it all away. And I've just been having fun ever since, and been having a ton more success.
Man, what an incredible story. And it's something we can all relate to in some way, shape, or form. You know, for the listener, I know you can relate to some kind of failure in your life, some kind of self-doubt, some kind of dream and goal that you've had that's in the back of your mind, but dipped your toe in the water and cause you didn't want to get burnt, so you just dipped your little toe, your toe in the water and you got your toe burnt and so you've settled, you've given up, you've let go, but there is hope, there is a chance you can get back in there and fight the good fight and create self-belief and do it in a way that allowed where you can focus on the process and not the outcome, and do it in a way where you're not feeling that pressure, but rather you're having fun. Michael, this has been an absolutely incredible episode. I think in some ways for me, listening to you talk, it's so, our paths have been so similar. So, and our mindsets through the whole thing have been so similar. So I appreciate you making time to come on the show. My listeners like to get one action item. I always try to get one kind of action item that the listener can take in the next, let's say 24 to 48 hours to start moving towards their goals. Maybe it's something that you do, or maybe it's some kind of habit or something that you can recommend that the listener can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to start moving towards their goals.
Well, I think they're already doing it by listening to your podcast. I mean, it's absolutely a shame these days with computers and social media and our phones that are basically computers and all this. We have so much. Your great grandfather had zero resources to find motivation except for Sunday morning mass, besides old books. I mean, the fact that I can hop on this computer right now and I can sit here for the next 12 hours and drink this coffee and listen to 1 million podcasts of 1,800 YouTube videos, all kinds of sermons, all kinds of motivational talks. We have every single ounce of motivation in the entire world right here at our fingertips, sitting here on our computers, on our phones, in books, at our churches, at these summits and these leadership conferences and all this kind of stuff. So your listeners are already taking that step towards that self-education and that self-motivation, seeking out people like yourself. Even if people don't know you, they've never met you, they hear your voice, they hear the words that you're speaking, and it gets ingrained into their conscience, and they live a better life and they believe in themselves more. And I hope that I brought a little bit of value today, and the words that I've spoken resonate. And I will just leave the listeners with this, that at the end of the day, somebody has to be the best. So you have to ask yourself, why shouldn't it be you? I think that was something that really helped me. And I recited that to me all the time. There has to be the best fighter in the world. There has to be the person with the most amount of sales in your industry. Why shouldn't it be you? There has to be the best this and the best that in all of these different professions. So why shouldn't it be you? We're all just human beings beating with our hearts beating blood through the same bodies, essentially. And we're all here on this earth trying to accomplish great things. Somebody has to be the best. Why shouldn't it be you? And it's not that people don't do the right things. It's just that they don't do them long enough. So stay the course. Continue to believe in yourself, continue to self-educate and listen to people like Jim Harshaw and the podcast, and get on YouTube and listen to all of these motivational things at your fingertips, and continue to self-educate and just believe in yourself, because at the end of the day, somebody has to be the best. That life that you want to live and that life that you want to achieve is right there on the other side of your fears. So go out there and just take the bull by the horns, and just believe in yourself, and great things are going to happen.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and hang up here and run through a brick wall. So Michael, thank you for making time to come on the show. And for the listener, that all came from a guy who was just riddled with self-doubt and self-sabotage. And he's preaching a message that we can all relate to, and that we all want to hear. And he's proof that it is all possible. Michael, thanks so much for making time to come on the show.
You got it. Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it. And I will talk to you on the next one.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, actually, why don't you tell the listener how we can find you, follow you, et cetera, social media, website, et cetera.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I have a fight coming up, Bellator NYC, June 24th on pay-per-view. So check that out. That's my next fight. That's only 3 weeks from today. So
okay, this may go out right after that. So you will have fought by the time this goes out.
Okay. Well, I just knocked out Brent Primus on June 20th.
Excellent.
Yeah, follow me on social media. All my social media is at Mike Chandler MMA. Literally, my favorite thing about this sport is is being able to have this platform and build my social media. And I get questions and inquiries and all that kind of stuff all the time on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. So reach out to me at Mike Chandler MMA on Twitter and Instagram. And I would love to talk to each and every one of you guys. And I appreciate each and every person taking the time to listen.
I think I'm going to move this one up in the queue, so we're going to get this one out before the fight airs. So June 24th, I'm going to have this thing out before the fight, so that everybody can kind of listen and then get a chance to watch it in action. Michael, thanks so much for making time to come on the show. For the listener, until next time, take the time to get clear on your goals and embrace failure as a stepping stone on your path to success.